All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Inquire Anomalous. I'm Jay Christopher King, and I'm joined here today, as I often am, by my good friend James Iandoli. How are you doing today, James?
I'm doing great, Jay. It's great seeing you here. And just for everybody watching and listening, this is our introductory episode to the Inquire Anomalous podcast. It's also going to be available on YouTube for people who want to watch the video version of these, what we're going to be doing here on the podcast and channel. So, just for people listening, I'm James Iandoli. You might be familiar with me through Engaging the Phenomenon. And, I have been involved in the field of, UFO research and anomalous experiences and anomalous study for a number of years now. And, Jay and I got together and we started doing um, the an inquiry into anomalous experiences and the phenomenon conferences together. And that's how we got here with Inquire Anomalous. Um, Jay, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I'm Jay Christopher King. I'm a co founder and director of the Experiencer Group, which is a private member site and private community for uh, uh, comparing notes and community for folks that have had anomalous experiences of any and all kinds, and that is all modalities. So it could be UFOs, it could be ghosts, it could be precognition, it could be out of body experiences, near death experiences. It runs the whole gamut, and it's a way for us to kind of have a community where we can find excuses to have events like support meetings, like book clubs, ask me anything sessions for so that experiencers can come together without worrying about kind of what the public thinks, and we can kind of compare notes and share. And so I've been doing that for a number of years now, and and some people might know me as well for an article that Ralph Blumenthal of the New York Times published last year. He intended it to be published by the New York Times, and as some people know, there's kind of um, there was a bit of a small controversy within our community about how he had challenges getting it published by the New York Times, and it eventually came out through the debrief. And in that article, I kind of came out of the closet, as it were, as a lifelong anomalous experiencer among another handful of people from the experiencer group community. So yeah, but before that, I was working in several kind of online groups and organizing experiencer support sessions through places like Richard Dolan's member site and Sean Isbjorn Hargan's extra studies class and other sites. So yeah, and through that work and just being in kind of the New York City tri-state area, James and I started hanging out and doing what we call various, and that's grown into now a series of conferences and a YouTube channel and a podcast, and it's amazing to kind of think about how far it's come from sitting around a couple bowls of soup or whatever in Midtown Manhattan, isn't it, James?
Yeah, for sure. It's been a pretty incredible journey already, and we're only a few months in here. I think what last time we met up might have been like UFO Supper Club number 10 or 11. We're losing track already. But yeah, and again, for me, I had some contact experiences early on, and I got very involved in what people call CE5 or heist human initiated contact events or experiences, and in that I've been doing a lot of UFO research, and I've been involved with a lot of experiencers and contact modalities myself, whether it's meditation or protocols and just having anomalous experiences in general. But just for people listening here who might be new to some of these terminologies that we're using, Um, Jay, do you want to talk about maybe what are anomalous experiences and what are anomalous studies?
Sure. It's interesting because what I've found over the years is that sometimes anomalous experiences, it really depends on what kind of community you come from, or what kind of cultural background you come from. Because what might be perfectly normal to one community might appear kind of mystical or magical, or completely bizarre and absurd to another community. And so, often it turns into cultural context. But in general, we're talking about situations that don't conform to the conventional understanding of reality. And the often in kind of our surrounding group of folks in our community, we talk about the term consensus reality, right? And consensus reality is kind of the shared kind of understanding of reality that we have together as kind of an unspoken social contract when we go to like the grocery store, or when you go to your job or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, we have this common understanding that we're on this roundish planet, like hurtling through space, and there's solid ground beneath our feet and all this stuff, and that there's even like these wild aspects of physics that we don't quite understand. We have all of these kind of constructs like already kind of built into our framework for our day-to-day experience of reality. And then there are these things that don't quite fit. There are these such situations where somebody might have a dream that seems like what's called precognition, where they kind of see an experience that happens in the future, and then it actually comes true, right? Precognitive elements in dreams. There are situations where people will wake up and either because of something traumatic, or because of just some bizarre state in sleep, they find them that their consciousness has kind of left their body temporarily, right? In what's called out of body experiences. People have near death experiences, as Leslie Kean wrote about in her book Surviving Death, where people, they might have a tragic accident, and then they start going through the process of what it's like for what they think of as their consciousness or their soul or their spirit leaving their body and moving on to wherever it goes next, right? And so it can run the gamut from that all the way to seeing, structured craft of whatever other civilization or drone or whatever that stuff is, up in the sky, right? And so it really runs the gamut all over the place. And I think one of the things about anomalous experiences is that we're trying to kind of map out the range so that we can kind of show, in some cases, situations are not in fact anomalous experiences, but they're in fact universal ones. If we actually look at the evidence and we look at the history of our species. What do you think, James?
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, it could be something like a lucid dream, a precognitive dream, a UFO sighting or UFO experience. And I think what is so remarkable about, you know, any of these anomalous experiences is that they have a transformative quality to them. So it only just begins with the anomalous experience, so to speak, and it can get into territory of what people call an awakening, and you could have like a paradigm shift, and then you're kind of off on this journey, and there's really no going back. So I think it's fascinating in that regard, and yet at the same time it's part of the human experience. So to some degree, people are having these experiences kind of just happenstance through their day-to-day life, and yet we have to deal with them. And over the years, again, as Jay pointed out, culturally there may be stigmas around it, definitely in the Western materialist perspective. However, the more that we see with scientific developments, and they're trying to kind of track, you know, non-physical reality, so to speak, which is like 99.9% of the universe.
Mhm.
uh, the more that they're finding out that there's, what we would call like quantum mechanics and all these kind of innovative sciences are are they more or less, lend credence to, the reality of anomalous experiences. So, not the other way around, which is something else that's fascinating. And I think that we're headed in the right direction with that. And, as time goes on, I think there's going to be more openness from the scientific community into what we call, anomalous studies and anomalous experiences.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, and along with that, I think one of the things that you and I kind of share in common as a strong potential for the future and where we want to kind of see things headed is these situations where we find like science and the social sciences having a lot of dialogue with each other, because they're so social sciences meaning like philosophy or psychology or anthropology, or even religious studies and things like this. Like there are a lot of traditional academic pursuits that actually touch on anomalous experiences quite a bit. And there are people like Jeff Kripal or Sean Asbjørn Hargens and others that are kind of working within academia to kind of like pull together the anomalous within social sciences. And so moving forward, in a lot of ways, being able to find useful utilitarian features within some of these academic frameworks for how we can really amplify that and amplify dialogue so that we can build a broader picture, of what really is kind of the ecosystem of the strange or the anomalous, and is something that I think we both find very important. When you say, James?
Yeah, and that's, again, we have the conference series, an inquiry into anomalous experiences and the phenomenon. And one of the things that I really appreciate about the phenomenon, through personal experience, and again on a larger scale, what Jacques Vallée would call cultural effects, is that, the phenomenon is, a physical object that is, we can track in certain ways through physics, through, radar and gun camera footage, and, even a camera, or, what have you, the physical effects, radiations, and all those kind of traces that can be physically mapped. And but at the same time, it's the UFO phenomenon is like a bridge between physics and metaphysics, because there's this physical object that's demonstrating what can be considered metaphysical principles, meaning, a physics that's greater than our current understanding, and what we would see in like anomalous experiences, right? Like bilocation and precognition. Here's what seems to be, at one level, possibly a technology, which is technical and physical, yet it's doing these things that seem metaphysical. um, so that's why I really appreciate the UFO phenomenon, because it kind of is able to bridge those worlds of physics and metaphysics. And, a perfect example of that is, slide 9, right? It's here we have a Pentagon or DoD briefing slide from ATIP, and it's talking about cognitive human interface and all these kind of abilities that the UFO phenomenon is displaying. Yet it's something that you might be familiar with from like an ancient text about like the cities or miracles. So, I think that is really fascinating in that regard, and important, and it's kind of telling as to where we are as a society and a culture, and where we could be going. Because again, we're it's I think that with the realization and the confirmation of the UFO phenomenon, we it's going to open kind of the consensus reality to the idea of these anomalous experiences in a more welcoming and destigmatized manner.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think, a crucial component of what we're trying to do in general with the experiencer group for myself and my community that way, and you with engaging the phenomenon, and now with Inquire Anomalous, and kind of like our wider social circles, is really working on destigmatizing and normalizing these conversations, and not just normalizing and destigmatizing them, but actually getting to a much higher level with regard to how we can talk about these things, right? So we're getting past the point where we're shy to talk about them with our own family groups, and we're able to get past that and move to the point where we can have conferences, um, with very, very, high level, academics and professionals getting together in a place like New York City, and to be able to talk about these things without blinking an eye, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thanks to the work of people like Jeffrey Kripal and Dana Pasolka and Gary Nolan and many others for sure. But some of these individuals have been very open. And again, our last conference in October in New York City, we had an amazing group of people. Dr. Gary Nolan, who runs the Nolan Lab at Stanford University, um, at the same time, is an experiencer. And again, he doesn't blink an eye at saying something like that, and yet he's created like uh, incredible sciences and patents um, that are that give him credence in the scientific community, um, and he's bringing that same kind of credibility and even the scientific approach, even though it's open-mindedness to the UFO phenomenon. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so it's amazing that we're able to host these events in New York City and have academics come out openly discussing these issues. And again, our next event is going to be Saturday, December 3rd in New York City. Although, you can participate in live streams. We're going to have links in the description of all in the video and the podcast if you want to participate in that. Um, and, we're going to have Dr. Jeffrey Kripal, who, is a chair at Rice University. And, he's co-written a book with Whitley Strieber, who's also going to be at the conference December 3rd. And Christopher Mellon's going to be there. So you have somebody from the humanities talking about these social sciences, like you mentioned, Jay, but you also have somebody like Christopher Mellon and Leslie Kane who've worked, to get the videos out from basically the Pentagon and put it on the front of the New York Times.
Absolutely. Yeah, it'll be an amazing situation, because it'll definitely be the first time that Christopher Mellon, Leslie Kane, and Ralph Blumenthal are all in one room in a public appearance like this. But even it's just the first time that Leslie and Ralph have done an in-person appearance. And so having that, and having it in December of 2022, which is 5 years to the month of their original kind of expose on the front page of the New York Times, that was, as you said, informed by Christopher Mellon's work. Um, that revealed the ATIP program, that revealed those now world famous cockpit videos. Being able to have Leslie and Ralph join us in Manhattan, is one of the real strengths of being able to have these kinds of events in New York City, which for many years has kind of fallen off the map with regard to conferences dealing with anomalous experiences, with regard to ufology, and anything kind of in this broad kind of network of concerns, right?
Yeah, and again, it just is showing you with the conferences and not even just the conferences, but the greater dialogue within the UFO community, within anomalous studies, this kind of bridge between, the UAP world of, disclosure and UFO studies, but also the whole wide spectrum, all the way from that to anomalous experiences and anomalous studies. Again, we have, Christopher Mellon, Leslie Kane, Ralph Blumenthal, but we also have, Sharon Hewitt Rowlett, who is, she participated in the BICS contest, the Bigelow Institute for Consciousness Studies, um, which is incredible. And I mean, the funny, I don't want to say coincidence with that is, but Bigelow
Mm-hmm.
had the OSAP program, right?
That's right.
So it's which is pretty incredible because again, it's the it's not just these physical object UFOs, but also the consciousness aspect. Um, and we have to have this, in my opinion, this inclusive approach to both the UFO phenomenon and consciousness studies. Um, so I think bringing everybody together in that kind of environment and being able to make it inclusive is a very helpful thing for the conversation.
Yeah, I completely agree. Consciousness studies, and there are lots of kinds of wings within the online dialogue of these topics that want to keep some of these issues very separate, and sometimes they do deserve to be separate, but often they deserve to be looked at in kind of overlapping ways, and so we can kind of find the taxonomy of like what do we have in what do these situations have in common? What do they have? What is different about some of these situations, and how do aspects of consciousness or perception or our interface via our senses with the reality around us, like how is that affected by anomalous experiences and the phenomenon, and what can we learn about ourselves because of things like how our perception and how our consciousness might be um, kind of manipulated would be one word, or adjust, like, or just kind of or
Augmented.
even augmented or just shifted, you know what I mean,
Right.
like because a lot of people will report, often kind of like how people perceive like psychedelic experiences. If somebody does psilocybin mushrooms or LSD or something like that, the augmentation of their different senses and things like that. And often in situations with anomalous experiences, people will perceive time differently, or they might like suddenly like they can't hear anything, and that seems strange. And so, there's definitely many layers with which perception and consciousness and the interface of our senses is a really important component and does have a scientific underpinning towards how we're looking at anomalous experiences and the phenomenon.
Right. And kind of like almost the flip side of that is that somebody can have a UFO encounter and then have awakened psychic abilities or healing, and again, if you could take a science and try to figure out how that's happening, that has the potential to again augment human potential through the sciences by the understanding of the anomalous. So
Absolutely.
is a great, I think, road for opportunity and evolution in sciences and human understanding. Because again, one of the major themes about all these experiences is it has the transformative quality, but it even if you're having a UFO experience, through the experience of that and through dealing with it, coping with it, individually and collectively, with groups like the experiencer group, you discover so much about yourself in that process, you know.
Absolutely.
So I think that's
Absolutely.
also important.
Absolutely. Well, let's see. Is there anything else we'd like to address today in terms of like? I think one thing to mention is that we're going to be loading up the 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 talks from our October 8th conference on this channel. We already put up Mitch Horowitz's talk, which was amazing. which is kind of about both ESP studies and the history of ESP studies, and also a bit about a skepticism and kind of skepticism in the community, and the point at which um, skepticism can be done in a bad faith effort by folks. And I really loved his talk. He's such a brilliant, eloquent speaker. And I was really, really happy that Mitch was able to join us on October 8th. Wouldn't you say, James?
Yeah. So he's so eloquent, and he's such a great communicator. He's got great ideas. And for people watching and listening to this too, Mitch is going to be our first guest here on Inquire Anomalous. So Jay and I are going to have a sit down. We're going to do an interview with him here. So that's something to look out for. We're going to be uploading the lectures from the conferences, the past one and the future ones, onto the podcast too. So you can listen to the podcast and listen to our interviews, but we're also going to have the lectures, so you can listen to these fantastic lectures that are made possible by people participating in these events. Again, so I encourage everybody to participate in the live event or the live stream, because you're making it possible for us to just put this out there on YouTube for everybody to access, and on the podcast for everybody to access. And we can go forward from there and move the conversation. So again, we're going to be doing interviews with people on the podcast and the YouTube channel. We're going to be making announcements for further endeavors with Inquire Anomalous. We're going to be uploading the lectures both to the YouTube and to the podcast. So we have a lot coming, and I highly recommend that you follow us on Twitter also at Inquire Anomalous. Subscribe to the YouTube if you want to help us share it and get the awareness out, people that might be interested in these subjects, whether they're kind of like OG researchers and experiencers, or if they're just curious about these kind of subjects. Because I think, again, with what's going on, we're expecting a UAP report today. Maybe it might
Mm-hmm.
be a few days late, but
Mm-hmm.
that's that kind of confirmation, disclosure, and the broaching of the UAP topic is a perfect segue to kind of open people's minds into anomalous experiences, to inquire anomalous, right? Inquire into the anomalous, which is,
Nice.
again, goes right into what we're doing here, because we're part of the Inquire Anomalous. Is we're not here saying, hey, listen, everybody, here's all the answers, we got to figure it out. No, we're
Right.
taking the approach of inquiry. Like, what is this? What does it mean? That kind of never ending endeavor of growth and potential, and kind of everything that goes with that, almost in a Zen mind, beginner's mind way, or in like the Advaita Vedanta, Vichara, inquiry contemplation model. It's something to inquire and contemplate. And how much better is it when we can do that together as a collective?
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, a collective, and the idea of open-mindedness, open-endedness, and and recognizing as a community that we don't have all the answers, and we probably won't have all the answers anytime soon, that we have to kind of live with that, live in the mystery, and we can still make progress within living in the mystery. And along those lines, with the community building, I think it's important for people to recognize when we're talking about the conferences, when we're talking about this stuff, I think people out there can tell by this point that we're just two guys, like putting something together on our own. This is a DIY, this is a do-it-yourself grassroots effort that we're doing, and luckily, other people around us are already getting inspired to help participate, to volunteer, and things like that. And we don't have any sponsors. There's no corporate interest. There's no corporations behind this. It's completely self-funded. And so, we are able to do what we're doing here, the conference that we had on October 8th, our upcoming one on December 3rd, and events in the future, because of the participation of people that want to see an open-minded, high level dialogue in the community and a broader sense of the community. And being able to do that, is more possible when we don't dumb it down, and when we don't have these kinds of corporate interests and sponsors like other people sometimes do. Wouldn't you say, James?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I hope that people see what Jay and I are doing, whether it's UFO Supper Club or putting together like an incredible conference with academics and scientists that just, serendipitously came about, and I hope it encourages, inspires people to do the same in their areas. Or maybe you can't do it in your area, but you could do it. You can make your own YouTube channel or podcast and kind of like join us in this conversation, in that way as well. So I hope that people can participate in any way they can in that regard. And again, even if they did a UAP or UFO disclosure tomorrow, I think that's the beautiful thing, is that like that's just the beginning of everything,
Absolutely.
especially with consciousness and the anomalous studies. Even if they said, here's a UFO, here's the craft, here are the beings, this is where they're from, and this is how the technology works. On an anomalous study thing, and anomalous experiences, that's just the beginning. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah,
Because if you had a being and you had the craft, well, and if they had an instruction book for the craft, that's one level. If you could point in a direction and say this is where they come from, whether it's like another planet or another dimension or anything along those lines, but do you have their history books? What's their understanding of the structure of the universe or of reality itself? That, I mean, the second that we reach that step, it opens up so much more frameworks in terms of like having a system of like comparative history potentially between species and things like that. So people often talk about like capital D disclosure as if that's like that's the end of the story or something like that, but in fact it's just a beautiful beginning in a lot of ways, right?
yeah, especially if one or two of these intelligences are like past or future humans. That's gonna be
Oh,
that's gonna
sure.
be a doozy, you know. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So again, I'm really appreciative and grateful that Jay and I are able to do this, and that we're able to do this in New York City, and that we've already gotten incredible support and participation, and we greatly appreciate that. And again, we are appreciative everybody's joining us on this journey.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone. We really appreciate having you with us, as James said, for this journey. It's going to be great.
Yeah, so make sure to share, subscribe, like, and stay tuned, because we have a lot coming soon, including some of the lectures. Take care, guys.
Take care. See you, everybody.